I think that you are the first friend that I've ever made through Instagram. I
Yeah,
believe that's where we met.
I think so.
How did we even meet? Let's tell people who are listening.
Well, you had posted the video. I think I saw your video that went viral of the asking to swim in someone's pool. And then after that, I started following you, and I think I was liking a bunch of your content, and then you had reached out to me. And then we did the boldness challenge together, and that's kind of where it all began.
It's so cool because you've seen many iterations of what I've been up to over the
Yep.
past 2 or 3 years, all related to boldness, all me trying to get out of my comfort zone and help other people do the same.
Yep.
But it has been iterations and trying things. The boldness boot camp, which you were part of, didn't really work.
Yep.
So it's been really fun getting to know you across time and seeing what you're up to. And it's funny to reflect on that period because that was when I recorded that video of me jumping in that guy's swimming pool. It
Yep.
got a lot of views. And I had people in the Philippines reaching out to everyone who liked it because there was like 12,000 people.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to ask, what should I do next? I
Yep.
really wanted to do something with this. I felt like I had this opportunity to connect with people, and I couldn't reach out to 12,000 people on my own. So I remember that, which was funny because one of the first people they messaged was my girlfriend. She's like, "What? What are you doing? Like, why'd you text me this?" And I was like, "Oh no." I said, "Don't send it to people who I know."
That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, it's funny too because when I met you at that period, I feel like that was like a big transition period for me. Like I had just come off of kind of working by myself for most of 2023, but I wasn't working very much. I was freelancing with marketing clients, and then I was kind of getting ready to start up the agency with my business partner at that time. And I remember I was doing the boldness boot camp with you while we had just started the agency. And I was thinking a lot about what I was doing, but I didn't yet have the forethought to realize I probably shouldn't have fully committed to that. But at the same time, it was an endeavor that I learned a lot in.
That's okay. We're always just figuring out what it is that we are doing, what we want to do with our life.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue to ask, what are you up to right now?
Well, right now in August, I had a conversation with you that helped me make a very big decision. I spent most of 2024 running a consulting agency, I guess you could call it. I was working mainly with contractors, and my business partner and I, we had experience in the contracting industry ourselves. So we kind of focused in on that. And when I talked to you in August, I was at a point where I had been in the agency for most of the year and we were kind of in the grind of it, but I was just really done doing the same thing all day, every day. And I also felt like I was capping my impact within the agency. I knew that there was more I wanted to do and more I could do, but that was just not a vehicle that was going to allow me to do it. And we had a 40-minute conversation where we tried to kind of figure out how I could talk to my business partner. And I called him the next day and was like, I'm done. Like, I need to figure out how we're going to do this, but I need to switch it up. And now, uh, got back from British Columbia where I was living for the summer in September and then decided to, partner up with a friend of mine to make some money so that we could buy an RV and hit the road. And now we've been on the road since November 23rd. So it's been almost 3 months now. We've basically just been driving across the US. One thing I haven't told you about that was really funny is when third day of our trip, we broke down. Okay.
No.
Like full breakdown on the third day. And we're stuck on the side of the road and we're like, fuck, we don't know what's going to happen here. And we're trying to call, like, CAA or a tow truck and something, and they're telling us, like, ridiculous amounts that it's gonna cost, and we end up finding this guy named Dan who runs a small RV shop in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and, he helped us get towed to his shop. We spent 6 weeks with this man. 6 weeks in Fort Wayne, Indiana, basically just like, he did a bunch of work on our RV, and we helped him out at his business a little bit, and, we just learned all about this guy's life. He's in his, like, late 70s. He fought in the Vietnam War. He used to be a race car driver. He's flown planes. Like, we learned so much about this man, and now he's someone we FaceTime every couple days and just kinda talk to him and catch him up on what we're doing, which is super cool.
So you got to meet the most interesting man in the world in real life.
Literally, and it was so funny too because it's just like everything happened exactly when it needed to. This man had not celebrated Christmas or any holidays in like 20 plus years because his mom died like 20 years ago and it was just really hard for him. And this year we ended up spending American Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Eve with him, and he celebrated all of them, and it was just such a nice experience to have with him because, like, clearly he had a very hard exterior, but he's one of the most giving people I've ever met. He had such a big heart, and he was, like, just so open to helping us. He literally, when we met him, was supposed to shut down his shop, and he was gonna hit the road and retire and just go travel, and because he met us and figured out the issues we had, he literally signed a lease at a new building and moved to the new building just to help us, but he didn't tell us this until, like, 2 weeks after we had moved there. So that was a crazy experience for sure.
Shout out Dan.
Literally, that guy is he's the best, and you know what too is he's totally, like he's a very to himself kinda guy, and I think that me and my friend are, like, some of the first people that he's really opened up to and, like, gotten comfortable with again in a while, but, like, we went out to dinner with this guy, we went to breakfast with him, we spent, like, 24 hours a day with him for 6 weeks straight. Like, he gave us a place to stay where we could plug in our RV and, like, be fine for the time he was doing the work and stuff. It was crazy experience.
So you had your RV parked, like, near his house or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, that is the best story I've heard in a
For
while.
6 weeks, and then finally, we got the work done, and we left Indiana, and then, a bit after, like, we tried to leave the first time, and then we had another issue. We ended up having to go back, and then he had to kind of fix things again, but now we've been on the road, we drove the first night we left at 7 p.m. from Indiana, and we drove all the way to Alabama, and we got there, like, 8:30 in the morning the next day. And now we've been all across. We spent a bunch of time in Arizona, which was super cool. We did Joshua Tree and over in California and everything as well. But it's been awesome.
It sounds so much fun. It makes me wanna ask, is there a bigger why or a purpose behind this trip, or is it really just to get out, see the US, and connect with people?
I think for me, like, after being in the agency where I was, like, just working, 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 and there was no purpose to it for me, like, I just wanted to enjoy my life and start doing stuff on my own time and my own terms. And I think, like, I knew that I had the skill set to do that and not have to work a 9 to 5 basically. So I literally my friend had just gotten back from Southeast Asia, and he was just kinda waiting around trying to find a job in Toronto, and I called him the day after I left the agency. I called him and I was like, "How does a 6-month road trip sound to you?" He was just like, "How are we gonna make money?" And I was like, "That's we'll figure that out. It doesn't matter." And that's been this whole trip, just figuring it out. Like, we have not planned anything. Like, we take it day by day. We go wherever we want. We do whatever we want, and we've sustained ourselves so far, which has been pretty awesome. But I think for me, like, I just want to experience stuff, and I'm not at a point where I'm ready to like sit down and be working all day every day because I just don't see that as something I need to do right now.
Right, and I asked you as we were setting up, like, "How long are you gonna be in San Diego?" And you're like, "I don't know. We'll figure it out."
Could be a week, could be 2, like I mean, we have until, like, around the end of April that we can be in the US, and then we've gotta go back because that's our 6 months. But after that, we're planning on going to Italy. Like, I'm gonna keep traveling for the next while. I don't see myself wanting to kind of stay in one place for a long time. You also know I started the coaching business in September. I'm now working with like 9 people, which is awesome. We're doing like a mastermind group, and it's really interesting because I'm working with a lot of younger guys, like between the ages of like 17 to like 20. And all of them have zero business experience and aren't very disciplined. So it's quite the challenge for me because on the one hand, I really want to focus on the mindset side of things and make them the people they need to be to run the kind of businesses they want to. Um, but also, I'm teaching them all the foundational stuff to actually build their businesses, which is really good. But it's been awesome, and a bunch of them are already making money from their businesses, and they started from nothing. So it's really interesting to see how transferable what I've learned is over the past couple years.
I love that so much. I'm just envisioning you with these 17 to 21-year-old guys, and they're
Yep,
just looking up to you, and you're teaching them about the business, but about the mindset and about all
yep,
these other things.
yep. No, it's been interesting, and I found, like, I first started working with just one guy, and then I've kind of gotten most of the other ones through him, just friends of friends and stuff. Um, but I like it because 'cause they're very tight-knit, they all know each other, so they can kinda have that community aspect without me there as well, and they motivate each other and help each other stay on top of things, which is pretty awesome to see. It's also quite interesting because when I think of my stereotypical idea of what a 17-year-old or 18-year-old guy would be. It's very different from the way these guys show up, which is it's nice to see. But they really want it and they're hungry and they're willing to learn as well, which being coachable is very important when you're trying to coach someone.
It's a very important skill.
Yeah.
What kinds of businesses are these people starting?
So they're all in the online space because that's kind of I found like the stuff I know is mainly transferable in the online space. What I know from running a painting company, I could teach someone how to start a service business, but I just don't care as much to do that. A couple of them are running coaching, different kinds of coaching businesses. A lot of them are doing kind of online fitness coaching. A few of them are doing drop shipping. One of them starting a podcast and going into content creation. But there's variety with it, which is nice as well because it kind of helps me expand my horizons a bit within areas that I haven't yet worked in the past too. So that's pretty cool.
You had mentioned, I don't know when it was, but it was in the community. You were sharing in one of your videos. So for those of you listening, Thea is part of the Bold Action community, and we're doing this 17-day challenge. And you'd mentioned that you made the decision to, I think, drop out of school in a day, the decision to leave your six-figure business in a day. It sounds like you make big decisions quickly. What
Yep.
goes into that decision-making process?
I think I've always been someone that people would perceive as impulsive. I put air quotes because I don't consider that being impulsive. I think, like, for me, a lot of it stems from just being comfortable with the unknown. I feel like when I was little, I always needed to know exactly what was gonna happen, when it was gonna happen, and I always planned and I was very organized. Um, but I think as I got older, I just realized that, like, that's just not realistic and kinda letting go a lot of those expectations and just being able to I like to use the differentiation of a choice versus a decision. I think that a choice comes after justification and thought, and you have to kind of analyze things to be able to make a choice, versus a decision is made because you decide. There's no justification, there's no thought, it's just an action that you're taking. And I think I lead a lot of the bigger decisions, or what people would call bigger decisions in my life, just as decisions rather than choices. Because I know that if I make it as a choice, I'm allowing my thoughts and my past and everything that I already know to dictate my future. Versus I much rather come from the perspective of who knows what's going to happen, but why not see, you know? Because that's what life is in the first place. And just getting more comfortable with that, I think, has allowed me to kind of just be able to jump on things a lot. My parents were like, "You're dropping out of school? When did you start thinking about this?" I was like, "It's been a couple days." No, it's been this morning, but again, like, I don't think I see as much weight to those decisions as most people do.
It sounds like for you, choices require more thinking, more deliberation, whereas if you make a decision, you can just decide,
Yeah,
which is really interesting because decision comes from the Latin root desire, I'm probably butchering it, but it means to cut off. And making a decision just means you simply cut off all the other options and you say, yep, this is the
yeah,
path I'm going down. We're going to see what happens.
yeah. And it's such a beneficial place to come from because I think, like, people waste so much time on just, like, mental masturbation and overthinking and trying to decide what they're gonna do when in reality, just mess up a million times. Like, make the mistakes. Just put yourself in the ring and see what happens. Because that's what's exciting, right? That's what keeps things interesting, and I think so many people miss out on so many opportunities because it's just fear. They're scared and they want they wanna be comfortable in knowing what's gonna happen, but, like, you don't get to know what's gonna happen. That's why life is exciting. If you knew everything that was gonna happen until the day you die, it'd be pretty damn boring.
Even if you try as hard as you can to predict what's going to happen and to know what's going to happen and to mitigate the risks
Yep,
and all of that, it's not going to help at all. So
exactly.
I feel like that's the biggest meta skill to build is being comfortable in the unknown
Yep,
and knowing that, like you said, the quickest way to learn things is to make a bunch of mistakes.
yep,
And if you become the type of person who knows they're going to be okay with whatever decision they make, then you have to spend less time deliberating and questioning and getting stuck in that analysis paralysis.
exactly, and it's like, I see that state as well as, like, just going through the motions. You're not living when that's happening. You're just, like, stuck. You're just waiting for the next thing to happen, and I feel like that I lived in that state for a very long time. Like, for most of high school and even into, like, I only did a year of university before I dropped out, but for, like, that first year and even a bit of, like, before I started my painting business, like, I was in a very depressed state, and I was always, like, just waiting. It was like I was waiting for life to get better. I was waiting for everything to change. I was waiting for something to happen where all of a sudden I just felt better. And in reality, that change was not in a single day. That was not an overnight change. That was something that was built slowly over time with a lot of little habits and just changes in the way I showed up, in the way that I perceive things as well. And I think that through my concussions, which you know a bit about, like I've had 7 concussions, and all of those were by the time I was 20 years old. And with that, I spent almost 5 years dealing with persistent concussion symptoms. I had chronic migraines, I had sleep issues, I had random lapses of temporary paralysis where all of a sudden I couldn't feel my left arm or my left leg. I had vision issues, like the list goes on. And when I was in that state and like dealing with all of that for so long, like everyone around me and my own thoughts were just telling me that I was broken and I could never be fixed. And that was a story that was reinforced over and over and over again. Every time I had a doctor's appointment, oh, we don't know what's wrong. You hit your head too many times, I guess. It's getting worse. We can't do anything. And it was just reinforced, reinforced, reinforced. And until I rewrote that story and like was able to perceive things differently, I was stuck completely in that. And thankfully, I had a coach I worked with who completely changed my life. And one conversation with her, basically, what happened is we sat down and I was at a point where my doctors were essentially telling me, like, you're showing signs of early onset Alzheimer's. We're going to have to like start making a plan for you to move home with your parents. Like, you might not be able to take care of yourself in a couple years. Like, we have no idea what the timeline is and the progression of things. And there was brain scan after brain scan to show this. And for me, I didn't tell my parents about any of that because I knew their opinions would trap me even further in the story. And luckily, I was working with a coach at the time, and she sat me down and she was like, "Are you willing to try something completely different?" And I was like, "Yeah, like whatever, give me anything right now." And she said, "I want you to stop doing every single thing your doctors are telling you to do. You're going to stop taking all the medications. You're going to stop doing all the little exercises and things you do to mitigate your symptoms, and you're just gonna like you're gonna go cold turkey with all of it." And I was like, "Okay, what's next?" And she was like, "Every morning and every night, I want you to sit down and I want you to do a 15-minute meditation. And all you're gonna do is," we had basically a mantra. I don't remember it word for word, but we had a little mantra that was written, essentially just helping me rewrite the story that I was healed and I was healthy and there was nothing wrong. And for 2 months, I did this. And after those 2 months, I had to go to get all my tests done again and basically just have everything redone. And every single test that I got done, every scan, every nerve test, whatever it was, I hadn't passed any of these in 5 years. I hadn't passed a baseline concussion test in like 6 years. Like anytime I would go to get a concussion test done, they told me I had a concussion. Like it could be any day of the week, anytime. And that was the case for 6 years. And after this 2 months, every scan came back like completely clear. My doctors were like, if I could go back to just experience their reactions again, I would love to because they were astonished. And still to this day, they'll check in with me every couple months and be like, "Are you still good?" And I'm just like, "Yep, everything's fine." And like they don't understand. There's no like medical explanation for what happened, but again, it's so mental. And like I was trapped in it because of the stories I had around it and the thoughts that I was being fed constantly.
I don't even know where to start with that. It's so freaking amazing. So you changed the story in your head. You removed all of the actions that were showing you that something was wrong, that you were broken, the medication, the whatever else you were doing, the
Yeah.
people telling you, Thea, you have a concussion, you are losing your mind.
Yeah, literally.
You stopped waiting for permission. You
Yeah.
decided with your coach to take things into your own hand
Yeah.
and to start living, which is such a powerful concept. Were there any places along the way where you were really low and questioning everything and couldn't see hope?
100%. I think like well, before my coach and I had that conversation, I would say I was in that state for years. And even after getting out of it and like kind of having most of my symptoms go away and like finally being back to where I was pre-concussion, but as a completely different person, um, there was definitely times where like stuff still happened and all of a sudden something would trigger me and I was like, fuck, I don't want to deal with this again. Um, but I think one thing for me, like, I had suicidal ideation for years, like, in high school, and that was something I didn't really experience as much, like, after kind of dealing with a lot of my concussion stuff. Um, but even, like, n in the not recently, but in the past couple years, like, there'll be times where that comes up again. And when it does, I think, like, I now perceive things very differently because of the experiences I've had and the way I'm able to look back on it now rather than looking at it as, like, "Okay, my thoughts are telling me I don't wanna be here anymore." Now it's like, "Okay, there's a part of me that's screaming at me to let go and let that part of me die so something else can be born." And I think, like, having that outlook on those experiences now and when I've experienced them kind of after injury, like, it's a way easier place to navigate and to get through when I'm seeing it as like, "Okay, this is time for growth. This is not time for me to, like, not wanna be alive anymore," which I think is a very helpful kinda shift in perspective to have around that.
That's a very powerful distinction that I've heard other people talk about, especially when it comes to suicide and
Yeah,
ideation of that sort, is realizing that you as a person don't not want to be here.
yeah,
There's a piece of you that doesn't want to be here, and you don't have to identify with that
yeah,
piece, and you can let that piece go so that you can grow into who you need to become.
yeah. Exactly, and I think as well, I spent so long running from that part of myself. It was like, "We're good, like, I'm good now. I can ignore it, I can suppress it, I can pretend it doesn't exist," and then, like, I would be completely good for weeks, and then one of those moments would come up one day, and I'm like, "Okay, clearly there's something that I need to acknowledge here, like, I haven't been fully paying attention to what's going on." But again, just having that different perspective and being able to look, it's like, "Okay, I need to make a change in myself somewhere right now, because that's why I'm feeling this way." And that is just, again, way easier to navigate than the latter.
Totally. So you have your doctors telling you that you're gonna have to move back in with your parents. This is the end of the road. You have early onset Alzheimer's, all these things.
Yeah.
Then you completely heal yourself in 2 months, stopping all of the things that you're supposed to be doing to make you better.
Yes.
What happened next? Is that when you
That was wow, that was probably 2 years ago now, so that would have been, like this is when I first started kinda marketing by myself when I was freelancing. That was kind of that time period. I had finished running my painting business, just shifted into marketing, and I was not doing well for a while, and then, like, had that crazy shift, and after that, that was shortly before I started, working with my business partner that I was in the past agency with and kind of made a big shift there in a lot of ways.
okay, you shifted what you were working on. Did you shift any other lifestyle habits that were going on?
100%. I think, like, one thing that really helped me was just spending more time outside. I've always been someone who, like, absolutely loves spending time outside, but I think, like, during those years where I was really depressed and just, like, not taking care of myself as well, that was something I definitely, like, didn't do as much. Um, I think a big thing for me as well with the concussions was before all of those concussions, like, soccer, that was my life. That was my identity. Like, I was Thea, the soccer player, for, like, 12 years, 16 years, whatever it was, and after that, it was like, I can't play anymore? Who what am I supposed to do? Who am I?" Like, I don't know, like, that was my sanctuary, you know? We all have those things, those places we can go to where, like, we can just be 100% present, and for me, that was always soccer, and then I didn't have it anymore, and I think losing that made me have to meet myself again and figure out who I was because I was so entangled in that, and that just also showed me how, like, fragile identity is and the fact that, like, we cling to that so desperately to prove, like, something to other people or something to ourselves, but in reality, like, that could change tomorrow. That could change in the next hour. And I think that was an experience for me that, like, totally made me realize, like, okay, I don't need to put myself in a box and label myself and, like, trap myself in certain things. Like, if I want to leave my six-figure business tomorrow, I can, and that's fine because I know that there's something else that I can go do and I will enjoy it. And like, I think just not knowing is exciting at the same time.
It's easy to get wrapped up in identity as this is what I do, this is who I am. For me, it's my mustache. If I lose this bad boy, I'd be absolutely lost. But I resonate with the soccer because I played soccer my whole life
Yeah,
too. And then if that thing goes away, you ask the question of who am I?
yeah,
What am I? What do I do?
yeah,
How do I operate in the world? So those are really powerful examples. And I love how we're approaching this from so many different angles because if anyone's listening and they're feeling depressed, if they have
yeah,
a suicidal ideation, if they have any of these things that you're talking about, they have a chronic illness that the doctors say can't get better and it's only going to get worse. Pretty much all of that is untrue. And the
Yep.
more stories you can hear about that and the more times you can share your story, so I'm so glad you're here.
Yep.
It's so powerful.
Yep. I appreciate you having me. And yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things too is there's like so many different experiences in my life have all led to the same thing. Like I think having that identity crisis, you could call it, made me go so existential in the sense where I went down the rabbit hole of like, what's the purpose? Like, what is life about? Why am I here? And I think like I'm extremely grateful that I experienced that because it also gave me the opportunity to ask the bigger questions and to like look deeper at things and actually ask myself what I want and what I care about, which for so long was not the case. And you are someone who does that really, really well. And like for example, with your job in the past, like you walked away from the finance job because you realized you were living someone else's life. And I think like being able to do that and just also constantly ask yourself, like, is this in alignment with me? And what I'm doing right now and how I'm living my life actually how I want to be doing it? And if today it's a yes, but tomorrow it's a no, then make the change. But we cling so tightly to like needing to have it all figured out. None of us will ever have it figured out. And I think that's really important to look at just because everybody is always questioning that and trying to hold, just again, too tightly to that concept of needing to know.
I feel like that's a theme here is the tight grip on needing to know
Yep,
what's going to happen, how it's going to play out. And if you can build that skill of getting okay with not knowing, being okay with whatever shows up and knowing that you're the type of person that can handle the highs, the lows, the
exactly.
trials, the tribulations, that is so helpful. So I feel like what we're talking about here with the figuring out what you want and listening to that authentic voice, I feel like this is a perfect time for you to read that voice note you sent me,
I
which
could
is
do that.
something you wrote. And as you pull it up, I just want to share Thea was sharing in the community yesterday, talking about things you've written, and you read one of them. And the one you're going to read is different than the one yesterday, which was about kids and play and imagination and magic. But you are such a good writer. And I didn't know this about you at all. And I love that I get to share this with the audience.
I appreciate that. I am excited to share it. I got it here. Awesome. You good to go?
Let's go.
Perfect. There's a moment, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, when you realize you're not actually living your life. You're reciting it, repeating the lines handed to you by parents, teachers, society, and that relentless voice in your head that whispers, this is just how it is. But what if it isn't? What if the life you're living is just a rough draft, scribbled in someone else's handwriting? What if you could pick up the pen, cross out the parts that don't resonate, and write something entirely differently? To author your life is to stand in front of the mirror, strip away the stories you've inherited, and ask, what do I actually want? Not what sounds good, not what looks impressive on a resume or an Instagram feed. What makes your chest crack open with curiosity? What makes you feel awake in a world half asleep? See, most people don't realize they've been ghostwritten. They follow scripts designed for survival, not fulfillment. Scripts like go to school, get the job, settle down, play it safe, don't ask too many questions. And when life feels empty, they blame themselves, never questioning the plot they've been handed. But you're here because something inside you already suspects the truth. You're not here to be a supporting character in someone else's narrative. You're here to write your own. Authoring your life doesn't mean forcing certainty into every chapter. It means embracing the mess, the rewrites, the plot twists. It means daring to say, this isn't working, and then having the courage to write something new. When you start living this way, everything shifts. You stop waiting for permission. You stop outsourcing your decisions to other people's opinions. You stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, what would make this life feel undeniably mine? There was a time when I didn't think I had the authority to write my own story. I thought life was something that happened to me, like a train I was strapped to, just holding on until the ride was over. But the moment I realized I could choose, that I could rewrite, reimagine, and reinvent my life, the world cracked open. Suddenly, I wasn't a passenger anymore. I was the damn conductor. And that power, that responsibility, changed everything. So here's the truth. The pen's already in your hand. It always has been. The question is, what story do you actually want to tell? Because one day, whether you're ready or not, the final sentence will be written. And when that moment comes, I hope you can look back and know you didn't just live a life, you authored it. Boldly, honestly, unapologetically yours.
Holy mic drop. I don't even know what to say to that. It is so good. Most people don't realize they've been ghostwritten. Oh, I love that so much. When did you write that?
Recently, actually, I probably wrote that one a month or 2 ago. One thing that I really like doing in coaching is using my writing to help get a point across to my clients. I think that, like, I'm able to articulate myself fairly well when I'm trying to explain something, but I think having these pieces where I'm just super focused in on a concept and I'm able to like write it out a lot more clearly than I could speak it. It's helpful with even on the group calls. What I do right now is like we'll be talking about mindset something and they'll all just sit and listen while I read something like this. And then we'll kind of go through with each person and they'll give their takeaways and kind of what came up for them when I was reading it. And it will kind of just lead the discussion. Which has been super cool to see because in the past, my writing is my writing and no one reads it.
Well, you need to get that writing out there in the world because
I
people need
appreciate
that.
it.
And it's interesting that you say that you use it to inform your coaching or really complement your coaching because I've been working with one client, shout out, you know who you are, and we have such good conversations that I almost work the other way, where we'll have such a powerful conversation and something will shift for him in that session
Yeah,
that then I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's a lesson that I need to go write about more. And then I'll share that in my newsletter. I'll share that other places
yeah,
because it's that like transformational moment that can be distilled down and it's much easier to articulate it when you have time to write about it. But
yeah,
I haven't thought about the other way of taking things I've written and almost presenting them as a
yeah.
jumping off point.
Yeah, it really it works quite well to guide conversations, especially with some of the more, like, just difficult concepts that, like, we all think about, but, like, it's hard to have a conversation with someone about it sometimes because you can't fully, like, just articulate what you're feeling about it, and I think, like, most of the time I write, like, I wrote that in probably 10 minutes. When I sit down and start writing, it's just I'm in the zone, and it just comes out. Like, I don't when I start something, I don't know where it's gonna finish. Um but I think, like, again, just using that with the coaching clients is really helpful because it just kinda opens their mind up in a different way, and they're also far more engaged when I'm reading something like that, like, they'll sit and, like, really focus in on what I'm saying, um, but yeah, it's been a helpful tool to guide conversations, and I'll have coaching calls sometimes with no structure other than the fact that we're starting by reading this, and we're gonna see where it goes from there, which has been quite interesting.
I'm going to steal that, borrow that, because I have launched my group coaching program and I'm experimenting with different formats, whether it's like full group discussion
Yep,
or it's based on an assignment that they did, or this next one that's coming up on Thursday, we're going to do pure hot seat coaching. So it's like
nice.
each person gets 15 minutes. What do you want to focus on? Like, let's go.
Yep,
Let's get into it and see how far we can move in 15
yep.
minutes. So I really like that idea. What would you say is exciting you most in life right now?
Just being able to spend my time the way I want it, to be honest. I think, like, the reason that I got into business in the first place is because I have the mentality that I want both financial and time freedom, and I want to be able to live my life the way I want to. And I think the past couple years, like, I've done that in a sense of, like, me a year ago wanted to live my life that way. Me now would not choose the same thing. But yeah, I think just being able to spend my time the way I want to. And one thing that I think I'm always working towards and I kind of use it to center my focus in anything I do is I'm always challenging myself to learn how to be comfortable and happy anywhere with anyone doing anything. And I think like always working towards that puts me in a lot of really interesting situations. Um, but it's fun to experience for sure.
What are you doing to work on that right now?
I mean, right now we're taking it day by day and seeing what happens. I think in the past as well, like if you had asked me 2 years ago to go on a 6 month road trip with no plan, I would have said no plan. Like that would have been really hard for me. Versus now, it's like I don't really care. We can do it. We'll wake up in the morning and decide where we want to go that day. And I think the not knowing is what's exciting me most of the time, just like not having plans and kind of just taking it day by day, hour by hour, and just doing whatever comes to us.
It's wild to think about, and as you share that, what comes up for me is, "Oh, no, not me, I could never do that." But then I think about, I'm a coach, I work remote. If I had good Wi-Fi and a reasonable time zone, I could do everything. If I had an RV, I'd bring the cameras, we'd have the podcast
Yep.
equipment. It's so interesting to think about how quickly you can change your life.
Mhm.
You can decide one day to make a change, and the next day you can be living a completely different life.
Yep. Well, that's like it's insane to me how much change occurred at the end of 2024 because I went from I was working ridiculous hours most of the year, and then in August, I stopped running the business, and 2 months later, my friend and I had an RV, and we're ready to go on a road trip. So, like, so much happened so fast, and that's also because we took a lot of actions in a very short period of time to make that happen. Um but I think, yeah, I think just, like, having the comfort and knowing that I have the skill set to be able to financially support myself and do whatever is very comforting because I'm not afraid to just kinda take chances and just do different things and try different things.
You're like a cat who knows you're gonna land on your feet.
One of my friends, my old business partner, he loves to say that I'm a little fairy who's floating around in the forest. That's what I'm doing. But I don't know. I think like just again, the not knowing is exciting and just being able to spend my time however. If I can go just lie on the beach all day and go do some surfing and then tomorrow go hike up a mountain, I'm very happy right now.
I think that's what's so interesting about getting to talk to a person like yourself is you've done the super structured, grinded out, make lots of money, work really hard life.
Yep.
And now you're in this like a fairy floating through the forest on the beach, doing all these things. So it's not like you're someone who has just always been traveling like this. And what would you say you're learning from the differences in lifestyle?
It's definitely challenging me and putting me outside my comfort zone in a lot of ways. I mean, the living standards of living in an RV versus having a house are significantly different, I will tell you that. Um, yeah, I think just also, like, being in such a close I'm living with a friend of mine right now, and, prior to this, him and I have it's also funny, I'm living with a guy in the RV, we're not in a relationship, every single person that we meet always thinks we're in a relationship or questions that, but, it's funny because prior to us living t like, doing this together, we've been friends since high school, never spent this much time together at all. So that alone was like, "Okay, let's see how this goes. Let's see if we don't kill each other after a couple months." But it's been really good, and I think we're both very independent people, which has allowed us to kind of have our space and also just kinda go with the flow and do whatever. Um, but yeah, I would say, I mean, just taking it day by day is probably the biggest discomfort for me because that's not something I've ever really done in the past. And I think one thing that living this way has taught me as well is like the grind is nonsense in my point of view. I think that you can be very successful, whatever that means to you, without having to sacrifice all of these things that all the gurus and big business people say you have to sacrifice. I think that you could sustain yourself and you can make a very good amount of money if you want to, and also have the time to be able to do the things you love and spend time with the people you love as well. And I don't think that it's one or the other. I think there's so many people online that preach like you've gotta have the late nights and blah blah blah. It's just such nonsense to me. And like I've been there, I've done it, and it fucking sucks in my opinion. And like there's just such a better way to do it. And I think that's why with the coaching business, I've decided like this is not a business where I'm gonna throw myself in the deep end. Like all the businesses I've run in the past, complete learn how to swim. And like that was good and it taught me a lot and made me like build a lot of habits and skills that I now have that I didn't in the past. But at the same time, I could have been so much happier and so much more present and enjoyed the process so much more. And that's why with the coaching business, I'm like not putting any pressure on it. I'm doing it on my own terms, how I want to do it. I haven't poured a ton of money into it, so there's no financial pressure on it. And like I'm just kind of seeing how it goes and scaling at the pace I want to go to. Um, which has been really nice and a breath of fresh air compared to what I've done in the past. Because with the agency, it was like, okay, we dumped a bunch of money into it at the beginning, and it's like, now there's numbers we have to hit to make sure the business stays afloat. Versus, I don't think that that pressure needs to exist for you to be successful, and I think that's something that's so heavily preached within the business and, like, community.
The concept of burning the ships,
Yeah.
creating desperation and necessity.
It's like the suffer it's like so there's it's like the perception that we need to suffer to, like, succeed, and I think that it's such a ridiculous concept because in reality, like, what you label as hard or suffering or negative, I could change my perspective and perceive the same thing as exciting and awesome and challenging and cool. Like, and it's your perception that dictates how you're gonna feel in that experience. It's not the experience itself. But most people tell themselves it's the experience and they just assign meaning to something without ever like thinking about it. And that's why you experience that. But it's like, also, what if you could enjoy all of it? And that's something I'm really trying to teach my coaching clients who are building these businesses as well, is like, I want this to be fun. I don't want you guys to be in grind mode because I think that's just nonsense.
I think the internet has seen enough of that, and I feel like the pendulum is gonna swing back, but I love what you're saying about fun. That's what I realized today. I was on a call with someone, and the whole movement I'm creating is making facing your fears fun.
Yep.
Because facing your fears is this scary thing that you do alone, and there's shame and guilt and
Yep.
all the nonsense that comes with it. Or facing your fears can be playful, lighthearted. You can do it with other people. You can talk about how scary it is in the moment.
Yep.
And if people can tap into that energy, if they can have fun while seeing what the other side of fear looks like, I think so many more people will realize that they can face their fears to live a life that's more true to themselves.
Yep.
They won't just suffer in silence and slowly waste away in their 9 to 5.
Yep.
And that's
100%.
what I'm so passionate about. And I think you nailed it with fun being a key ingredient.
Mhm.
Let's get rid of the grind mode.
Yep. How would you say within like the coaching business, obviously it's evolved a lot over the past couple of years. Like, has it been fun for you from the start, or have you had your ups and downs with kind of what it's been like?
I have for sure had my ups and downs, both because it's really hard at times, but also because I think I subscribe to that grind mode mentality a lot.
Yeah.
But some of the hardest parts were the uncertainty and wanting to know, am I going to be able to, air quotes, make it as a
Yeah.
coach? Will I be successful? Now that I've closed that first chapter of, can I even do this to sustain myself?
Yep.
Now I'm having way more fun. And it's a question that I want to turn back to you, and I can actually answer more of it in a moment. But do you think you need that grind chapter first so that now you can create things and have more fun? Or could you have skipped it?
I think that's a hard question. I think that I would not be where I am if I didn't have that. But do I think that I could have gotten to the same place on a path that was more enjoyable? Yes. And I'm grateful that I went through that because it showed me that I know I don't want that. And I know that, like, there is another way that I can do things. Um, but no, to anybody out there who's, like, wanting to start their own business or go into something like that, I don't think that you have to lock yourself into the grind and go through all the suffering in order to get out the other side. I think that, like, you can approach it from a different place from the beginning, which is what I've tried to do with my coaching business and, like, just come at it from a place of fun. Like, I'm learning here, I'm experiencing stuff, and I think, like, I still always wanna be challenging myself. Like, I think that, like, I become very stagnant when I'm not being challenged. Um, but I don't think that I correlate challenges and suffering anymore, which I used to do a lot. And I think when I was in the grind mentality, those two things, hard work, challenges, were very correlated with suffering, which it's like, it doesn't have to be. Obviously, in any business you're going to run, there's going to be certain things that you don't necessarily want to do. There's always the busy work, there's the little things you have to get done. But also, in the grand scheme of things, I think you can enjoy the majority of it. And if you don't like doing something, pay someone else to do that part.
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing, you can delegate, you can automate, there's ways to put yourself in a place where everything you're doing is enjoyable.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying about that. And I think that the non-negotiable is a certain amount of time where there will be all this uncertainty and that
Yep.
might suck. But I don't think it needs to be a sufferfest. It doesn't
Yes.
need to be this dark chapter, knowing that there are going to be what Mark Manson calls shit sandwiches.
Yeah.
There's always going to be those parts of the business that you don't like. But I think that's what I would say, to go back to your question. Looking back, I could have let myself have more fun along the way. But at the same time, I also think that the dark periods were necessary. And really, my darkest periods were before coaching,
Yep.
because there is so much value in that origin story. I was talking about this with a friend the other night. I think everyone needs to have their super shitty, terrible origin story because that's where a lot of times we find our purpose. We find the meaning, we find the thing that is worth going out and doing all this hard work for.
Yep.
And character, like a photograph, develops in the darkness. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Love that.
People find purpose in the dark. They find what is worth striving toward. And I do think there's more fun to be had along the way.
Mhm.
But it's something I think about a lot because people like Tim Ferriss, people like Aubrey Marcus, they always get asked, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Mhm.
They say, oh, I wish I wouldn't have worked so hard. I would have been easier on myself, knowing that I was going to be where I am today.
Yep.
But I almost feel like people have to go through it themselves. They have to maybe grind too much or have less fun to realize that there is another way.
Mhm. I think it also just comes with making mistakes and, like, failure, and I think if you can perceive failure as a positive rather than a negative, it also won't feel so hard at the time, you know? And you'll give yourself more room to just fuck up because it's not a bad thing. It's what is gonna help you learn and grow and become like, the best version of yourself, and I think, like, putting so much pressure on the failure is why we perceive that time. I do think, like, I agree with the fact that I think we gotta go through some stuff to become the best versions of ourselves, but at the same time, I do think, like, the majority of that time can be enjoyed. And I think if I were to go back and tell myself something, like, give myself advice a couple years ago, I would have said, "Just don't take it all so seriously." You know? Just that's it. Like, just don't take it so seriously. It's not like a be all end all. It's not life or death. And I think so many situations nowadays, like, there's so much pressure we put on it because we feel like it's like now or never. Versus like if you have like three different things you want to do in the future, pick one, do that now, and do the next after. And I think, like, people are afraid to do that. Like, on our call that we had the other day with the Bold Action community, we were in a breakout room, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but, someone was talking about, like, all the travel plans they wanted to have, and they were saying, "Oh, I wanna do this and that and that," and I said, "Okay, just do them all," and they're like, "Shit, I guess I can." And he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna book the flight for the first one now."
That's
But it's like, it just the realization of, okay, like, there's a future that exists where I can also do other things, so I don't have to put so much pressure on now being perfect and exactly what I wanna do for the rest of my life, because it's an absurd notion.
it's so absurd, and you said something that really just unlocked something for me, and it's that now I've gotten comfortable with failure. I built the Bold Action community in public. It failed, and then I had to do this challenge to reinvigorate it, bring it back to life.
Yep.
I am doing this group coaching program in real time, like getting feedback. I got some feedback the other day that did not feel good to hear, but now I've made a slight tweak,
Mhm.
and it's so powerful that the person who gave me the feedback was crying. He's like,
Yep.
yes, this is perfect. I think that's what made the first chapter feel like it was suffering and that I needed to grind more because I wasn't comfortable yet with failure. And
Mhm.
it felt like I had to grip things so tightly. I had to make sure that everything was perfect, that I never made a mistake because then I would fail and that would be the end of my life. And I think now, probably the biggest reason I'm having more fun and things feel so much lighter and I am taking things less seriously is because I'm no longer afraid of this scary monster called failure. I realized that if you fail, you just make a slight change and then you're back off to the races running in a
Yep.
different direction.
Yep. And I really liked what you did with, rejection therapy and just, like, getting used to that. Like, it's so important. That's, like, one of the things I'm most grateful about when I first kinda started my entrepreneurial journey is the fact that I had to door knock. When I ran my painting business, we had to do canvassing, we had to door knock. Best rejection therapy you'll get. Like, we would knock hundreds of doors in a weekend. I would get fucking the door would be slammed in my face. People wouldn't know, like, just so many things. And just, like, getting used to that I think was, like, so helpful for me to kinda move through the next couple years without worrying so much about that. I think the other thing as well is we put too much pressure on, like, what other people think and how they're gonna perceive us, and in reality, if you learn to, like, just take less weight off that, like, I would say most problems I was reading The Courage to be Disliked recently, and they talk about how most problems are interpersonal relationship problems, right? And It's so true. If you look at the root of almost any stress or any anxiety, anything negative, and most of it comes down to I'm gonna upset somebody else or somebody's gonna perceive me in a way that I don't want to be perceived. And like when you just let go of that and realize it doesn't matter, and if you want to be happy at the end of your life, then you need to make you happy now. It's so much easier to move through life like not being afraid of those things. Um, and I think one thing that's hilarious for me, I have a tattoo on my wrist that says "Be here now," and this is one of my favorite reminders because the tattoo artist totally fucked it up. Like, completely fucked it up. He put it in the wrong place, and one of the letters is way thicker than all of the other ones, but it makes me laugh every time I look at it because this was supposed to be, like, a good reminder for me to be present, and now it's also a reminder to not take everything so seriously because it looks terrible, but also, it still says what I needed to say. And I think that is, like, such a funny reminder for me to just look at because 'cause I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's on me for the rest of my life, but it is what it is, and that's okay."
And it's so much more powerful that it was messed up and that the E is a little bit too big. It makes me think about the tattoo I have on my arm, which is "Live a Story Worth Telling,"
Yep.
and I got that with Vinny in Japan, and the experience of getting that tattoo in and of itself was a story worth telling because the artist didn't speak any English. We thought he had perfect English because he had apparently been using Google Translate.
Yeah.
We get there, we can't communicate with him. He tells us that the tattoo's gonna need to be this big. We're like, "Bro, my forearm isn't even that big." And for those of you listening, he said it was gonna be like a foot.
Yep.
We're like, "No." And it's just so funny that these little reminders can be so powerful.
Yep. It really is, and it's yeah, it's hilarious to me. I laugh at it every time I look at it. But, yeah, I think just, like, putting less weight on everything is so important. 'Cause we're on a rock floating in the middle of space, and it's not that serious.
That is something I try and remind myself about as much as possible. And for me, that feels like the opposite of taking things too seriously feels to me like play.
Mhm.
So if I can show up playfully with that energy, I think that's why I'm so drawn to it. One, because it instantly cuts through fear, in my opinion. If you can be laughing while you're doing something, it
Mhm.
makes it less scary. But two, because it goes against, at least for me, that innate, maybe not innate, but that conditioned tendency to want to get things right and hold things so tightly. So
Yep.
I love the way you're going through life.
I
It's
appreciate it.
very inspiring.
I think I, one thing as well that I feel like I've kind of led with a lot in the past couple years is, like, first off, I feel like I have a moment every year where I'm like, "I got it figured out now." Like, I'm good. And I think in the past, like, 2 years or so, I've just been really willing to kind of drop my beliefs on the drop of a dime and understand that, like, everything is made up, and if I wanna have certain beliefs, I should probably be doing so because they benefit me right now and are helping me live the life I wanna live. And if new information comes into the picture that completely changes the way I think, then let's change the way I think. And I think in the past, I was so trapped in my thoughts and so just, my thoughts are me. This is all that there is. Like, I was always on a loop. Like, I had 10 different thoughts that went through my head most of the time. And all of them kept me stagnant and ensured that yesterday would be the same as today. And I think like when I first realized, okay, I'm not my thoughts, I am separate from my thoughts. I think having that realization was one of kind of the foundational shifts for me to really figure out where I want to go and what I want to do. Which I still don't know and don't like to put pressure on because at the end of the day, like I rather not know and just kind of see what happens. Um, but I'm curious with your experience with coaching all kinds of different people. I know your clients range in age. You have some clients that are a lot older of you. What is your experience like working with older clients who have quote unquote lived a lot more life than you have? And do you kind of have a harder time working with older clients because they might have more kind of preconceived notions about certain things?
It's a great question. My oldest client is 76.
That's awesome.
My youngest client, I think, was 18 or 19. And I've been really lucky in that a lot of the people that I work with who are quite a bit older than me, I work with through a leadership development company. So they're coming to me through this lens of this guy works for this leadership development company. He's an expert in all of these things, and they always give me way more credit than I actually deserve. But I've been super fortunate to work with people who are very coachable. They're very open. I've had only a few people who have let age get in the way. And when that happens, again, if I can be playful with it,
Yeah.
it seems to break through. And
Mhm.
really, it only takes a couple of good questions or a couple of sessions where we really move things forward for them to be like, okay, this
Yeah.
actually works. But that was definitely a hurdle. I mean, I started coaching full time when I was 26 or 27, and it was definitely tough because
Yep.
people were twice plus my age.
Yep.
So it has come up a little bit, but not as much as I would have thought. And that's actually something that I want to double tap on is that was one of my biggest fears. It's like, I'm going to get in this room and this person's going to be like, my adult child is older than you. Who the fuck are you? And that hasn't happened. And it
Yeah.
probably won't ever happen. And if it does happen, I'll be okay.
Yep.
I let that fear hold me back for a while.
Yep.
And there's insert whatever other fear you want to put in there. We often let these things hold us back and we wait for permission, bringing this full circle to what you were talking about. We wait for permission to start living our dream life. For someone to say, you can be a coach,
Yeah.
you're old enough. And if people can just realize that permission is made up, like you said earlier, everything is made up.
Yep.
Do what you want to do and give yourself permission to do it today.
Mhm. It's so important. And again, it's just a step. Like just make the first decision and then go from there. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. It's that first step that people get stuck on. And they just paralyze themselves in fear rather than moving forward. The age thing has been something for me as well. I mean, I'm 22 years old. And within the agency, we were working with middle-aged men who run contracting businesses, and when they hop on a sales call and see me, they're like, "Oh, what the hell did I just get myself into?" And I did get that reaction a lot, and it was something I kind of had to navigate. Um, but I think again, like, giving myself the permission gave myself the confidence because in those situations, it's like they can perceive me however they want to, but I know how I perceive myself and I know what I know. And if I sit down with them on this call and they listen to me talk, they're also going to realize that. And like having that confidence, but being able to give myself the permission first was what kind of allowed me to move through the fear in a lot of situations. And I think I've had to do that in so many different areas of my life. Even with this trip, like leaving the agency was a big decision. I mean, I was making the most money I had ever made, and I was like learning a lot as well about business and developing skills that I knew would be helpful to me in the long run. But at the same time, I wasn't happy and there was no fulfillment. And most days, I wanted to just get through the day. And being in a position where I want to get through the day is not living. And I've been in that state for too long to like want to still be there. Um, and I think like just to the listeners, like if you are someone that is in that place of like I'm just on autopilot, going through the motions, waiting for that thing to happen to make you realize and make the change, like, it's not coming. Like, you have to step into that yourself and be willing to just step outside your comfort zone and face that fear for, like, 10 seconds to realize what's on the other side, and you're the king of saying that, like, your relationship with your girlfriend, again, is 10 seconds of fear, and now you've been in a relationship for however long, and there's just so many little moments in life where, like, we could easily step into that, but we don't. And I just challenge people to just try and just see what happens, because 'cause you'll realize it's not that scary.
You realize it's not that scary. You aren't going to die. You aren't going to spontaneously combust. And that the other side of fear is freaking awesome.
Yep,
It's fun. There's opportunity. Everything you've ever wanted is just right over there
yep,
on the other side of fear.
yep,
And I love that you said 10 seconds because that's what I've doubled down on in my TEDx talk.
yep,
10 seconds. 10 terrifyingly bold seconds
yep,
is all it takes. And if you're willing to do that, anything is possible.
exactly.
I think I want to wrap up by coming back to this part about caring what other people think.
Mhm,
It's a huge thing that keeps so many people stuck. I want to share a lesson I've learned about this, and then I want to hear what your biggest takeaway has been across this as you've done multiple different things. But for me, it's been realizing that one, people don't care as much as you think they do. And even the people who are trying to care and trying to have opinions about what you're doing get it wrong because they're so busy.
Mhm.
I've told this story before, but one of the first posts I ever made when I quit my job in finance, I was talking about what I wanted to do next. I was starting a nonprofit and all this stuff. And I had multiple people come up to me like 6 months later and ask how my trip around the world was
Yep.
because they didn't even actually read what I was saying, but it kind of looked like I was going on this big trip.
Yep.
And it just made me realize in that moment that no one is actually paying attention, which is a good thing in the beginning when you're stumbling and trying to figure it all out.
Yep.
What have you learned from people caring or not caring?
I think for one, they're like one big takeaway is their opinions just don't carry as much weight as we think they do. Um, and the other, allowing like other people's perceptions to affect the way I perceive myself, I view as putting myself in a box. And I don't want to be in a box. So any view that someone has that puts me in a box is irrelevant because I'm not in a box. That's their perception. And I think the other thing that has been extremely helpful for me to realize is the majority of times people do perceive you in a negative manner or people have something to say to you that you don't necessarily want to hear. It's mostly projections. We're all mirrors for each other. And when you're putting negative stuff out into the world, it's very likely just something internally that you're dealing with. And I think being able to look at that of like, okay, they just said that to me, but it's like, I actually have sympathy for you because this isn't about me and that's okay. But you can say what you want to say. And I think just like having that understanding that like it's not personal. Like, it's really not personal. I think that is the main thing I use to ground myself is nothing is personal unless you make it so. And anything someone else says is not personal, even if it's about you. They can make a direct comment about you and your character, and it's not personal. Like, it is just them probably projecting something, and it doesn't, like, you don't have to put weight on that. Like, you choose how you receive those things. And I think when you choose to value your own opinion above everyone else's, it also removes a lot of the weight of what other people are gonna think and say because you know that at the end of the day, you can trust yourself, and that's all that matters.
I think that's where true confidence comes from too. Knowing that you can trust yourself,
Yeah,
regardless of what other people are saying, regardless of what is going on in the world.
yeah. I think for me, I've really all my friends say people call me delusional a lot of the time, but it's also just because I have this, we'll call it false confidence around certain things, but I just am so certain about certain things. Like if there's something I want to do, like I don't put limitations around it. I just believe it's going to happen and I can do it. And I think a lot of people, like I'll say certain things and they're like, how the fuck are you going to pull that off? And for me, there's no doubt, but that's because I've worked so hard to be able to validate myself and understand, like, again, if I show up and take the actions, I can make it happen. So anything else is irrelevant. And I think that has just been such a powerful thing for me to just be able to stand in certainty and come from a place of certainty way more often because in the past I never could do that. Even if it's fake and it's actual delusion, because I don't know what's gonna happen, but I can believe it, and I can believe it in my whole body, and when I do, it's far more likely to happen. So, that's just about bringing it here so that it could show up later on.
We're going to have to do a whole second episode about beliefs and delusions and how even if it isn't true, if it believing it helps you live your life in a good way, I'm on board with it. So that will be for round two.
Yep.
Thea, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people go to learn more about you?
At the moment, the main place where I'll probably most active is LinkedIn right now, so I'll, send that over to you so we can get it in the description.
We'll put that link in the show notes. Thanks so much for coming on. I am
Awesome.
serious about you getting your writing on LinkedIn, maybe on Medium. We'll figure out where it's going to go, but you
Yeah,
need to get those words out in the world.
appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Greg. It's been an awesome conversation.
It's been multiple years coming. Thanks for saying yes to my DM on Instagram 3 years ago.
Of course. Thanks for sending it.
You are welcome. And thank you everyone for tuning in with us today. As always, we love you guys. If you liked this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the Dare to Dream podcast on YouTube. You want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the amazing episodes we're going to be coming out with in the future. And if you liked this video specifically, please give it a like, leave a comment, let us know what you loved. Thank you so much for being here. We love you guys.